Hello and welcome to the Business Standard Morning Show. I'm Swapnil Joglikar. It's the 12th of September 2023 and here are the questions we'll be answering today. Has the G20 summit set India up for bigger things? What next for India and the G20? Nifty hits 20k. What will be the next pit stop? And G20 summit, what is a joint communique? The G20 summit is behind us now. Heads of nations and most delegates have left for home. It is India's moment. It managed to pull out a surprise by bringing different factions on board and thrashing out a joint communique. Russia is happy, and so are the US and its allies. Some say all is well if the end is well, but is it really the end? Or is the joint communique just the beginning of a long haul to a better planet? What next for India and the G20? Abhijit Kumar has the answer.
I would only say Bali was Bali and New Delhi is New Delhi.
Backed by what some say a killer team, Prime Minister Narendra Modi managed to do what most thought was an uphill task, and that too a day in advance. On the evening of September 9, PM Modi announced that G20 countries have reached a consensus. It remained elusive in the last 17 ministerial meetings. Some feared that it would become the first G20 summit without a joint communique. But it didn't. And it was not easy. All references to Russia and Russian aggression in the Ukraine war, which were there in the previous Bali declaration, were dropped. It placated Russia, but how did the US and its allies agree to it? Experts believe that PM Modi's diplomacy worked. The G20 nations agreed that countries cannot forcefully grab territories of others. It also highlighted the sufferings of Ukrainian people. So what does India's achievement of bringing all nations on the same page say about its diplomatic prowess?
The stature of India has gone up significantly. But we have to also remember that joint communique, the Delhi Declaration, has come with a helping hand from the G7 countries led by the US. This is because the G7 obviously has climbed down from its tough position that it wants to see a stronger condemnation of Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. This also indicates that the realignment of geopolitics has meant how much India has become significant for the Western countries. What it means for India going ahead, I personally don't think this would mean much when it comes to multilateral negotiations. It's not like India will resolve all problems. For example, in the upcoming WTO meeting in February next year, which is going to happen in Abu Dhabi, this time the WTO ministerial, a lot of issues will be discussed, including WTO reforms, e-commerce, where we'll find ourselves opposed to the interests of US and other developed nations. So there, the pressure will be on us to come on board.
One of the biggest achievements during the summit was the ambitious economic corridor. It is being built as an answer to China's Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, which critics claim has left a dead trail. BRI will connect Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Jordan to reach Europe via ports and rails. The United States too is a partner but is not being linked. However, there were no details about the financing or time frame for the project. On the economic front, the G20 countries agreed on a host of reforms. The need for strengthening global financial institutions through refining multilateral development banks and to boost the World Bank's financing. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said that the consensus on debt relief framework for Zambia, Ghana, and Ethiopia was achieved. This debt restructuring was essential for the financially lagging African countries. Apart from the debt restructuring, Sitharaman said that there was a global consensus emerging on regulating crypto assets as well.
It is important to note that the G20 countries have endorsed the capital adequacy framework, which will give the MDBs an additional headroom of lending up to $200 billion. One of the big things that we've all been talking about is crypto assets. The members unanimously were on board with the IMF and FSB paper, the synthesis note on regulating crypto assets. On debt as well, we've made some progress, but it is not clear if private lenders are on board with the common framework. There has been a whole report about digital public infrastructure and recommendations by the World Bank on what the countries need to do to get into DPI to improve financial inclusion. Those recommendations are voluntary. Certainly, there are a lot of things that are going to come up still. We shouldn't forget there is one more finance track meeting that will be held in Marrakesh in October, where some of the issues which as the declaration mentions as we welcome and we take note of, etc., will be discussed. And this includes the expert panels group on strengthening the MDBs. The volume 1 of the report has come. The volume 2 will come when the next meeting happens.
On the issue of climate change, India made incremental progress but stopped short of decisive decisions on the existing issues of fossil fuel usage. Ahead of the COP28 UN Climate Summit in UAE later this year, all eyes were on the G20 leaders to come up with strong resolutions on strong climate goals. The leaders agreed to triple global renewable energy capacity by 2030 and acknowledged the necessity of phasing down the use of rampant coal power. However, the group did not provide any plans to amend the existing policies and targets to achieve the renewable goals. They underlined the need of $4 trillion per year but could not lay out a clear pathway of how it will be achieved.
India has achieved a major success by including tripling of renewable energy and doubling of rate of energy efficiency among the G20 nations globally by 2030. Apart from that, a major roadblock could be in terms of the language around abatement of coal. India has been pushing for quite some time across several global platforms, including the COP, that the abatement of fossil fuel or emission control should not just include coal. It should also have other hydrocarbons, which means oil and gas. But the Delhi Declaration remains restricted to coal. There was a push from oil-producing nations such as Saudi Arabia especially, hence oil has been kept out. But we have to see now that how it paves way for countries to come forward, stop their coal production, reduce their thermal power, because post-Russia-Ukraine war, we have seen a lot of countries go back and open up their coal mines, open up their thermal power. So it sets up a very interesting tone for energy transition across the globe, across the G20 nations.
Another major win for India's presidency was that it was able to secure consensus on inclusion of the 55-member African Union as a permanent member. The emphasis of India on a strong global south will be lent a stronger support in the grouping where the G7 countries have played a dominant role till now. The move comes amid the expansion of BRICS, which included Saudi Arabia and Iran among other nations, which was seen as an attempt by China to make it an alternate to the G20. It was a tightrope walk and India has certainly done well. And to take stock of the progress, PM Modi has proposed a virtual session of leaders by November end, before the baton of G20 presidency passes to Brazil. In doing so, India has in a way acknowledged that not all promises see the light of the day. But for now, it is indeed India's moment. Coming on the heels of the moon landing, the G20 summit has made India a prominent voice of the global south. But will it be able to do the hard bargains? Only time will tell.
But is the absence of its name as an aggressor from the joint declaration a victory for Russia and its close ally China? What went behind the scenes in the run-up to the declaration? Bhashwar Kumar caught up with seasoned diplomat and former Foreign Secretary Shyam Saran. Let's listen in.
The G20 summit in New Delhi ended on September 10, with India handing over the bloc presidency to Brazil. This was the last G20 meeting, with the group effectively becoming the G21 after the African Union was admitted as a new member in a move that was proposed and led by India. The Indian side also surprised everyone by coming out with the G20 New Delhi Leaders Declaration a day ahead of schedule, when most experts thought the host would fail to drive consensus due to differences over the Ukraine war. There were compromises and a lot of work remains. But the outcomes did bolster India's claim to be the voice of the global south and address concerns about G20's continuing relevance. Against this backdrop, we have with us Shyam Saran, former Foreign Secretary of India, to speak on what's next for India and the G20. Welcome to the Business Standard Morning Show, Mr. Saran, and thank you for joining us. Let's jump straight to the questions. What comes next for the G20, or should we call it the G21? Would you agree that it has proved its continuing relevance?
Yes, I think it does continue to be relevant because, after all, this is the only forum where the most important and affluent countries of the world and the major emerging economies of the world are represented. So I would imagine that this relevance, its importance is likely to continue into the future. With regard to India and the role of the emerging countries, so far it might be correct to say that the agenda of the G20 and the proceedings of the G20 have been very much dominated by the affluent West, the major countries. So you see for example, focus on the Ukraine war, despite the fact that it is economic issues which must remain the focus of the G20. I think what is important is that if you take the Bali meeting, which was presided over by Indonesia. Now you have had a summit which has been presided over by India. And the next two will be Brazil and South Africa. So you have four important summits which serially are going to be presided over by the four very important and, in a sense, influential, emerging countries and, in a sense, representative of the South. So this ensures that whatever gains which have been made in terms of having a more balanced agenda of the G20, reflecting more the concerns, the priorities and the aspirations of the countries of the South, in particular the major emerging economies. This particular trend which we have seen, particularly reflected in the proceedings of the New Delhi summit, I think this trend is likely to continue.
The sense that I'm getting is that, the consensus that we were surprisingly able to forge on Ukraine, where we saw almost that perhaps the G7 even maybe conceded ground. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but that is the sort of sense that one got, that it was able to bring the bloc's agenda back to economics rather than geopolitics. Especially, it comes in the backdrop of the BRICS expansion, where people have said that expanded bloc and forum might even be a competitor to the G7 one day. So in that context, do you think it was also about the members being very cognizant of the fact that they need to maintain their relevance? Do you think that is what drove this?
Let me say right at the outset that I do not think that the BRICS, even in its expanded form, can really compete with the G20. They are simply not in the same league, in a sense. BRICS, by its very nature, would become dominated by China. So it is no longer a kind of a multilateral, forum of the kind that the G20 is. I think what is important is that if we take the Ukraine issue, which you referred to, what does this mean? That quite obviously there has been a major departure from the much stronger language which we saw in the Bali Declaration. So something has changed. The fact that this formulation has been quite significantly diluted, and you have seen the reaction of Ukraine, very disappointed by the wording. I think that represents more a decision on the part of the United States, and which also was able to influence the other West European and European countries, that we need to, accept this dilution as a price to be paid for making certain that India's moment in the sun, or India's coming out party, in a sense, this is not in any way affected or hurt. Because, of course, obviously, if you did not have a consensus declaration, it would take something away from India's chairmanship or presidency of the G20. So I think it was a very conscious, deliberate decision on the part of the United States, and having persuaded the Western Europe that, yes, we may have to accept this dilution, but that is a price to be paid because of the much bigger equities that we have in our relationship with India.
So, it has been seen as New Delhi and India's coming out party. But at the same time, progress was also made on agenda items that were of interest to India. So our next question would be that how do we make sure that the progress that was made at the New Delhi summit, that it's taken towards concrete outcomes?
Getting African Union into the G20. I think the fact that India, proposed this, India mobilized consensus on this. Obviously, your stock amongst African countries has gone up. To that extent, if you are looking at a China-India rivalry in Africa, there is no doubt that there is now a plus for India, minus maybe for China. So in that respect, I think India has done very well. You mentioned climate finance. You mentioned, the reform of the MDBs. Also the how to deal with the indebtedness problem, particularly of African countries. There is also how to treat new technologies, artificial intelligence, digital economy. So all these aspects, yes, there is a very forward-looking agenda. There is a very forward-looking action plan, even with respect to some of these items. But always the question is, how are they going to be implemented? So here I see two challenges. One challenge is that, event we are good at, process we are not so good at. You need to have bandwidth, you need to have capacity, human capacity, trained capacity to be able to translate this agenda into practical outcomes. Do we have that? That is one question to ask. The second question to ask is that in terms of many of the outcomes that we envisage, the wish list which has come out, it is still a wish list. Let us not forget that. This wish list requires the deployment of very significant financial resources. Where is the money going to come from? That is a big question mark.
Thank you for joining us, Mr. Saran. Just to sum up, the sense that I get from what you've told us is that India had its moment. It delivered. It got consensus where consensus was considered to be very difficult, if not impossible. A lot of the agenda items that were of interest to it, we saw progress.
Of India.
Albeit with compromises. Not in
particularly the digital infrastructure initiative.
Absolutely. So we saw progress, albeit with compromises. A lot of work remains to be done. But it seems that India delivered. I think that's the bottom line. What it set out to do, it delivered as far as the G20 summit in New Delhi was concerned.
Just like India, its markets too are upbeat. It has been a good run for the markets in the last few weeks, as the Nifty scaled up to hit the 20,000 mark for the first time ever. The run in the mid and small caps thus far in 2023 has been sharper. The small cap index on the BSE has jumped nearly 33%, compared to a 29% surge in the BSE Mid-Cap Index and a 10% rally in the Sensex. Is there more steam left in the markets, or is it time for you to take some money off the table after the Nifty hit the 20K mark milestone? Puneet Wadhwa spoke with Ajit Mishra, Senior Vice President for Technical Research at Religare Broking, on what the technical charts suggest.
Hello, Ajit, and welcome.
Thank you, Puneet. Thank you for having me.
The Nifty hit 20,000 mark for the first time ever on Monday. So how does the index look on the technical charts now, and can the rally take a breather?
So yes, Puneet, after this corrective phase for nearly 5 weeks, the last 3 weeks, we have reclaimed those levels. So it's roughly around 1.5 month kind of correction that Nifty has negated completely, and now we are at the record highs again. So the journey is going to be positive from here on, also taking clues from the sectors which have not participated yet. So first of all, the best part is that now almost all the sectors are pitching in when it comes to the contribution to the rebound or rally. And banking, still we have a room of roughly around 800-900 points, which is away from its record high. That can further fuel the momentum in our markets. But yes, in between, there's a possibility, since it was the 7th consecutive session that we were seeing the market inching higher. There could be an intermediate breather or consolidation in between. But broadly, we are eyeing 20,300 in the near future.
So which sectors and stocks, according to you, will trigger the next up move for the markets from here on out? And which ones can actually pull down the Sensex and the Nifty from here?
So yes, so broadly, as I've said, almost all the sectors are participating in rotational basis. Defensives are slightly on the back foot, like FMCG, pharma, we are seeing only selective participation. Rest of the sectors, be it reality, metals, auto, they all are contributing. And now banking, which was sitting on the sidelines, has started contributing from the last week itself. So we believe that banking is going to play a critical role. Alongside with that, some of the index majors like ITC and Reliance, which were sitting on the sidelines, they might also participate and help the index to inch higher.
PSU banks, Ajit, have actually done quite well in the past 2-3 days. So what's triggering the up move, and will it last?
So Puneet, we had this kind of underperformance or prolonged consolidation in the PSU bank, the entire basket. If you exclude a couple of names like SBI, which was trading around the record high, rest of the stocks were struggling. So with a breakout in the PSU banking index, we are now seeing that participation has broadened. And but still, we would feel that the top of the names like SBI, Bank of Baroda, Canara Bank, Indian Bank, PNB, these are some of the names which one should look at even at the current levels. But yes, in short term, as I've said, that there could be a possibility that after this recent outperformance, there could be some consolidation.
Another segment that has done well in calendar year 23 is the mid and small caps. Do they look overheated on the charts? And are there any sectors and stocks within the mid cap and the small cap basket that you like?
So yes, we are in the 6th consecutive month of up move when it comes to the broader indices. And in fact, it has been outperforming the market, the benchmark, from last several months. Both mid cap and small cap are trading at the record highs. We have seen almost a phenomenal surge. But still, in the last couple of sessions, we have started seeing fresh momentum. Earlier, it was a kind of like sign that there could be a bit of a profit taking or exhaustion, but that has negated, in fact, in the last couple of sessions. So that indicates that this, positive tone is here to stay. But yes, since it's 6th consecutive month of rise, there's a possibility that we might see some consolidation or profit taking in the near future. So keeping that in mind, it's very important to maintain stock-specific approach and look for the stocks which have not participated yet, or looking for the fresh breakout. So in the mid-cap basket, AB Capital, there is Aditya Birla Capital, Jubilant Food, LIC Housing Finance, Petronet, Voltas. These are some of the names which are still look upbeat for fresh up move momentum. And from the small cap space, one can look at CAMS, Kenvin Homes, EID Perry, Karur Vysya Bank, KRBL, and UTI AMC.
Any picks from the public sector enterprises space?
So yes, in fact, that space have also made very strong up move. The index is trading at the record highs. We feel that OMCs, after this recent profit taking phase, can be a candidate of recovery. So IOC from the OMC basket, then IRCTC, like after a decent corrective phase, we are seeing reversal in IRCTC. Alongside with that, ONGC, after almost 6 years of consolidation, we have seen a fresh breakout in ONGC at the record highs. And lastly on the list, Power Grid.
What are your top contrarian bets at the current level?
So contrarian best is that Reliance Industries, it didn't participate in the entire move yet. So in case if somebody is looking to accumulate, then Reliance Industries from the index major, HDFC Bank from the banking space, wherein one can look at for fresh buying despite the underperformance. So these are the top two names which one can look at the current levels. As a disclosure and disclaimer, I'm personally not holding any of these stocks, but our clients may have position.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
He's making plans for an early retirement. Business Standard.
Let us now turn our focus back to the G20 theme. At the center of the summit was a joint communique, which is being hailed as a sign of India's growing influence on the global stage. But what is this document? What does it consist of? Vasudha Mukherjee explains it.
At the end of the G20 summit in New Delhi, a formal statement was issued encapsulating the consensus and agreements reached among the participating countries. This document is formally known as the Joint Communique or the Leaders' Declaration. This outcome document serves as a declaration that is debated and signed at the end of the summit after reaching a consensus. The document represents the collective views of the member nations and encompasses their commitments to a wide range of global issues. The areas of partnership include economic, financial, development, and occasionally geopolitical matters. The joint communique holds significance as the summit's aim is not accomplished without this. The signing of the joint communique ensures global economic stability, policy coordination, promotion of multilateralism, and global development. In recent years, the G20 communique has also addressed geopolitical concerns, and it can serve as a platform for dialogue and potential resolutions on such matters. Various engagement groups of member countries meet throughout the year and develop their issue notes and outcome documents. These discussions then feed the consensus-based recommendations to the Sherpa meetings. The outcome document of the Sherpa level meetings eventually forms the basis of the Leaders' Declaration. However, all G20 ministerial meetings under India's presidency had ended without joint communiques because of disagreements and inadequate consensus on the Russia-Ukraine war. Instead, a series of chairman's summary and outcome documents had been issued. Given the evolving nature of the Ukraine situation and its inherent political complexity, a cautious stance was adopted before finalizing the document. Negotiators representing the member nations engaged in extensive discussions on September 4, aiming to reach a consensus and finalize the draft Leaders' Declaration for the upcoming summit. A 3-day Sherpa meeting was held at ITC Grand Bharat Hotel in Haryana's New district, chaired by India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant. The New Delhi Declaration came a day before the Leaders' Summit ended on September 9. The Sherpa focused on establishing a universally acceptable governance framework for digital public infrastructure, devising strategies to promote women-led development, addressing climate financing, and enhancing the effectiveness of multilateral development banks.
I'm backed by the nation's trusted bank, SBI, the banker to every Indian.
In 2022, the Indonesian G20 presidency faced tense moments too. The declaration was negotiated until the very last moment of the summit. Well, that's all for today. Catch the next episode of The Morning Show tomorrow. Thank you for watching.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.